Okay, good morning, everyone. I believe we have all our panel members that are going to be present for today. I see Brian, George, Damon, and Rod. Good morning. Shadjoy is going to be out today, but she so kindly sent me some comments that I will read out loud to her when we get to that point in the day. The format for today is presentation by the applicant and then discussion with the panel. We do not have any members of the public present. This meeting is being recorded. And so the first item up for today is Battery Lane Site C. This was just with the DAP last month in June, and the panel did have some comments for the applicant to address and return before taking a vote at the site plan phase for this. And those comments were outlined in a memo that staff had sent out last week. And I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to the applicant to get into that presentation and address comments. Bob?
Well, I think I'm the one that's going to kick this off. I'm Doug Wren. I'm with Brown Development Alden Properties. It's a pleasure to be back here again with the Design Advisory Panel. Just a brief summary of how we got to this point for those who perhaps were not here for the last presentation and discussion. We started with a sketch plan that we had approved for 5 sites that we controlled on Battery Lane. We decided to do this comprehensive approach that would be phased over 10 or 15 years to really benefit not only us, but the quality of the neighborhood that we're in. Our vision, as stated before, is to strengthen the residential character of Battery neighborhood, really by building on its assets as well as the unifying elements that bond this neighborhood together, specifically Battery Lane and the introduction of a separated 2-way bikeway that would go for the entire length of Battery from Woodmont over to Old Georgetown on the south side of Battery, improving the trolley trail connection as well, adjacent to our site D, and making through block connections. And that's very relevant to the site we're going to talk about today, Site C, where we are proposing to implement 2 through block connections. We focused on connectivity. That's what I described about some of the physical connectivity that we want to achieve. Also social connectivity I talked about, creating spaces and facilities both inside and outside to improve the social interaction that takes place in the neighborhood. And then environmental connectivity, improving the quality of stormwater, improving tree cover, energy efficient building, just all of those things that are important, particularly these days with such a threat of heat in our urban areas. So then we went on to Site C and we made some adjustments from the sketch plan that are shown on this rendering. Some important things we thought improved it, and we presented these at our last stat meeting. We reduced the curb cuts from 3 to 1 curb cut on Battery Lane. That certainly enhances the pedestrian and bike user experience and conflict. We replaced what was an internal ring road that surrounded our Site C with green and pedestrian walkways and street trees, and landscape and trees. So again, converting asphalt into green, we thought was a better approach. We moved the arrival plaza from the front, right on Battery, to the side of our site, tucked in, if you will, behind the building. And then we changed the building orientation, really taking advantage of the southern exposure, bringing light and air into the building and the site. So all of those were endorsed by the advisory panel the last time we met. But the panel also made a few important comments and asked us to re-examine 3 things in particular. One was the south lawn and how to activate that. How could we make that a more active place that would enhance perhaps the public safety aspects of it? To really re-look and explain a little more detail the setbacks and step backs between our building and the frontage on Battery Lane. And then to really think a little more about the architectural treatment of our tower element at the northwest corner of the building, and how to unify some of these elements so that there was a little stronger architectural statement. So you'll be hearing more about those three items. We did submit quite a bit of information for your review. And the design team will get into this in much more detail, but specifically the relocation of the dog park, you'll see details on that to the south lawn, and the introduction of some additional amenities and facilities that will help activate that area. We provided the fire access plan, the street sections, and dimension plans showing setbacks and step backs along the frontage, and also some renderings that I really think are even more important, that try to capture what that experience would be for pedestrians and bike users and occupants within the building as they look out and people look in, and the whole front porch element that you'll see more detail about. I really want you to focus on that. And then there's our architectural team will get into detail, quite a few sketches showing the articulation of the tower element and some changes that they've made in response to the DAP comments. So with that, I want to turn it over to our design team to really walk through these in much more detail for you.
Good morning. This is Trini Rodriguez with Parker Rodriguez. As Doug kind of gave an entire overview of the site, which you already knew, we have been actually on this submission just basically focusing on answering the comments that you all had as part of our previous review in front of you. So the things that were really related sort of to the landscape, and one that I think was an important comment from you all was how to keep these public elements that we have. I mean, as Doug explained, we have a very comprehensive system of open space that actually provides that porosity and connectivity that Doug talked about. And that includes the two pedestrian passageway and connectors, both on the east and the west, as well as the south. So, one of the comments was kind of like the activation of those spaces. And I think I mentioned, that we had been working hard to make sure that there were elements that attracted people and that, not only provided recreational opportunities for, the residents of this building, but also, as the passerby. So we had, on the west side, we had that open lawn, which we further activated. I think some of the comments related at what can happen there. So it was intended to be an open play area, so it can be used more flexibly. We have now nodes for people to sit, potentially even sort of work outside. We also introduced some grills at the southern edge under the trees with a paved area and tables. So the idea is that, it can be used by a multiplicity of people. Along the southern edge, we also have, moved the dog runs. So now we have two dog runs for, larger dogs and smaller dogs that are actually then off that southern end and linking to the passageway to that southern pass connector. So that's, a heavily used facility. As you all know, everybody seems to have dogs these days. So, and it does get used at all hours of the day. And then obviously, I think something that I did mention as we presented last time is that the way we've been designing our courtyard at the upper level is with the idea that becomes kind of like a balcony that offers eyes, and people sort of looking down and activating, at least eyes on the space. Lastly, to the east, we have an activity area, which has been left open. Our idea, at this point is to program it with the management team. So, it's large enough that can have things like, volleyball, badminton, even you can actually feed even pickleball. So lawn games. So the idea is that it will be programmed and it has it's large enough to have activities, and the intention is to really program it and have have it used as such. Again, just lastly, we are emphasizing the two connectors down to Rugby, the one to the east to the existing passageway by the police station, and the one to the west, which we'll realize once the property to the south is redeveloped. One comment that had been made was on the transformers. As it's a necessary evil to have transformers, and they have to be located sort of near where the power comes. So fortunately, we've been trying to, one, we're depressing them, so they're underground, which is a huge thing. Two, we want to keep them away from the path, from the pedestrian area. And three, I know there was mention of potentially screening that. We will study that further as the project further develops. We have utilities that are running and are still being worked on. So once all of that, settles, we'll look into other possibilities. But for now, what we've done is sort of tuck it in, try to put it away from the pedestrian passageway and allowing for green to be in between. So it doesn't affect the quality of that connection. So next, I think we have a few images that I think would help kind of clarify what I just explained. This is a view from the east, looking at the activity lawn area, the brownish area, or the dog parks, which will be amenitized. Those are in design right now, so they'll have mounts and elements to really activate it and make it an attractive amenity to users. You can see from here the balconies of that courtyard area, which has a number of activities, from community gardens to picnic areas to the pool. And then lastly, to the west, you can see from here the activity lawn. Now we're going to see another view, Bob, which is the view from the west side, the southwest, looking north east. You see the western passageway, how it connects to Battery and Rugby. And from here, you see again the dog runs, and we have an alley of trees, which is going to make really nice and pleasant, walking through these connectors. And I think with that, I'm going to let the architects, as Doug said, oh, sorry, there's one last view. We have a view at the ground level that kind of shows that amenity area. And here you can see the size of it is quite, it's quite nice. And we have the grills are right behind us, but we have sitting areas under shade. So people could also use it at quiet times for working and, and more active uses, as you can see here. And now I'm going to let the architects walk you through the frontage. Eric, I think you're muted.
Well, that figures. Sorry. Anyway, thanks. Eric Schlegel here with WDG Architecture. And as Trini mentioned, we will focus on the frontage towards Battery Lane in terms of the architectural expression and the relationship to the public realm and the pedestrian exposure and experience. So two items we'll focus on. One is the corner tower and how that has been enhanced since last seen. And then just the, again, the pedestrian experience along sidewalk views as you go past this building. So first, to focus on the tower element, to take note is what caps the tower on this project is an outdoor amenity. It's intended to be open to the sky, views to the surrounding neighborhood, and basically unimpeded, unobstructed views. So we've taken that one more step by diminishing some of the parapet that was enclosing this area and adding a glass rail there, which you see at the apex of the corner. And that's the reasoning for that, but it also differentiates the architecture, because that's the only place this is going to be happening on this entire facade and the massing at the roof line. The base, which was another comment, is how do we differentiate the base of this building somewhat from the tower? So here you can see the tower expression continues all the way solidly to the ground. To the right on this image is where we had some two-level units that have a different type of architectural expression, a darker gray coloration, and that base wraps in the building all the way around from front to back, turns up the side on the left side also. That used to engage the tower somewhat, about halfway. We've essentially pulled that architectural vocabulary back towards the south so that the tower itself can land solidly onto the ground without any interruption. As far as the pedestrian goes, if you take a look at the frontage along Battery Lane, you'll see variations in the setbacks. And the point here is to modulate the experience of those who are passing by. Sometimes it's closer, sometimes it's farther away, but it's a modulated experience. It's not just the straight wall like we have at the tower above. And we have a fair amount of widening and deepening of the pedestrian plaza at the main entrance, the main experience of the building. We put a lot of attention to that aspect. You know, being a mid-block project, we do recognize a corner is important, and it identifies a crossroads, so to speak, for the pedestrian and the through-block connection. But as a mid-block project, we feel that some of the signature feature here is more central and associated with that entry plaza. Next slide, we can get a view of that from street level. You can see again how the corner is punctuated not by adding more architectural elements, but it actually diminishes some. But that's in keeping with the idea of this building, which has a lot of indoor-outdoor expression, opportunities for wellness, enjoying the outdoors, and the unobstructed views from up there is an important aspect of that. So you really feel outdoor and free. So there's a certain transparency there also that allows for the possibility of people actually seeing each other from below and above. And it's another opportunity to give some notion of human activity. There's interaction from the top level to the bottom level. At the base, what you can see on the left here is the central feature, the trellis, the front porch. It's a datum, a gray datum. It's 2-story level. As it wraps to the right and gets towards the around the tower, you see a little bit of gray feature. That's where it's been pulled back, and is a continuation of the base. So the base is interrupted by this tower feature that is solidly anchored to the ground. And that's where we've made some modifications to pull back the architecture and differentiate it. The building itself, above that base level, it does have a unified vocabulary, but the corner is the place where that is pulled down, gauges the ground, and interrupts the base. Next slide, please. Here we see a better focus on the facade of the building, and you can see the differentiation of, on the right, the corner element. There's a a reveal, a different expression between the corner element and the field to the left, which is basically the tower components. Same architecture, full expression, but it is separated by these floor to ceiling windows. And the slight parapet at the top of that in gray, that has been pulled down a little bit further down, so they do not share equal parapet heights. And we do that on both sides of this tower to further express the differentiation between the two, that there's a distinct break from one element to the other, and to help the tower read as distinct, but still within the same overall vocabulary, but has some distinction in being different. You can very easily see here the differentiation between the base and the tower, where they separate from each other. And this base in the central of it, aligning with the bus stop there, is the central signature feature of this project, which again, we think is, it's a mid-block project, not putting all the emphasis on a roadway intersection, extreme tower expression, but putting it here in a central location of the building. And this is where we have a certain amount of transition and transparency of the project to what's beyond. There's a progression. There's a landscape forecourt. Then there's a trellis, which is semi-enclosed. Beyond that, there's front porch that is in fact covered. So you're getting more and more protection from the elements. Then a full glass view into what is beyond within the lobby, which is full of resident activity space and lounge areas and welcoming features. And through that, beyond to the courtyard. So there's a view to the activity within the building as well as the courtyard beyond from this point. Again, it's flanked on both sides by solid elements that are also amenity related. So the first floor itself is full of activity, and some of the second floor also, which I'll get to in another slide. So we move on from there. Here, to give some insight into what does it feel like? What's the experience of the pedestrian on the sidewalk walking past this building up and down Battery Lane? And we know it's remarkably different than some of the others there right now, but because of the way it's modulated, it lends itself to have a lot of interest and different experiences as you go. So this pedestrian approach is from the east. You see the continuation of the base features that were on the east side of the front facade as they wrap around and continue down the driveway area. Again, all the vehicular focus was placed on the side of the building here, but it is also well integrated into the base and shares some of the features of the main pedestrian entrance also in terms of being a transitional space from inside to outside. The trellis feature here is, it's up at the second level. Right at this corner, there is another terrace overlook that relates to amenities within at that level. So there's a lounging or library type of area on the second level there, with an opportunity to go to an outdoor terrace that is basically at the second level that can overlook the sidewalk there. And it's another opportunity for community connection for those passing by, those that are within, visually being able to connect with each other and potentially watch each other's activity a little bit, or just knowing that there's human activity and opportunities, this type of community connection. begin also to see the two bandings of landscaping. There's a row of trees directly adjacent to the bike lane. You'll see how that those trees and the landscape elements become more prominent as you continue down the street towards the main midsection of the building, which you see in the next slide. So here, probably one of the best representations of the meaningfulness of this pedestrian experience at the entry plaza. Again, there's a progression of the types of spaces. The intent is to be, it's a transitional yet transparent experience for all people. It's semi-covered and covered. It's an indoor-outdoor space. Behind the glass within the in the lobby areas, there's lounging areas that are complementary to the outdoor lounging area, which is what we conceive of as the front porch. And everything you think a front porch should be, this is it for us. I mean, we are providing an outwardly welcoming, friendly architecture, and we can engage in the community in a very neighborly way, while allowing insight to that is happening within the building itself. You can get another sense of there's another row of trees here, inboard of the sidewalk, creating more, there's some space. But the idea here is as with any front porch, it's a way that the community can get to know each other to some extent, even if you're just waving, or you're waiting for a visitor, or you're beginning to recognize who lives there and who lives down the street. Next is approaching from the opposite direction, from the west. You can very easily see here how the forecourt widens. It has an enhanced depth there. It's about, I was meant to say that the depth there is increased quite a bit from the adjacent flanking areas. So it's a more meaningful setback. The setback there is based on the use of that space and what we see it doing for the community and the residents, and how it enhances that connection. You can see the 2 rows of trees there for the buffering. Again, the idea is it's to be a welcoming experience, integrative of community. It's allow for interaction of residents, visitors, those in the public realm. Even if you're spinning by on your bike, you get a real sense of what this residence is about, and how it is intended to interact with the community on this portion of Battery Lane. That essentially sums up how we envision this project to be complementary to the Battery Lane experience at the pedestrian level, while at the same time taking into account some of the commentary regarding the tower element and how that's expressed, and how we believe that is a expression of what we feel how this building will be used in terms of interaction with the outdoors. And what you also see on this slide, just to the right, you see a little bit of wall there. That is the beginning of the base of the tower. And at the first floor of the tower, again, it is more enclosed, programmed amenity space. for socializing within the building.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up, and then we can certainly have a conversation about some of these things with the advisory panel. But I wanted to remind the panel, we requested 20 community benefit points for design excellence. And we certainly hope that the panel supports that request. And it's based, as Eric really described very well, our vision to really enhance this community, to go beyond just site improvements and amenities and facilities for our residents, but to create an accessible neighborhood, improve walkability. We'll do this entire bikeway, like I said, from Woodmont to Old Georgetown as part of this. Really, again, reaching out to our broader neighborhood to improve their accessibility and in all ways, physical, social, and environmental, to create a stronger identity for this neighborhood as really a place, not just an address, but a place that is an important residential enclave supporting downtown Bethesda. I would encourage the panel also to look at a lot of our technical attachments. And if there are questions about any of that material, we want to respond to that as well. So with that, I'll conclude the presentation and thank again the advisory panel for allowing us to come back in and presenting our work.
Good morning. This is Paul Morton. I got just a very quick question. Have you are you trying to achieve any type of LEED designation or equivalency on this building?
Yes, it is. It is in accordance with Montgomery County requirements. It's LEED Silver. There's a unique pilot program that actually requires 6 mandatory prerequisite points, some of which are a bit out of the ordinary for us, but are worthwhile. And that's what we'll be doing. We'll be following those guidelines and achieving that as part of the pilot program, a unique LEED pilot program for Montgomery County.
Hi, this is Brian. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to elaborate a little bit. Some of the uniqueness is there's some additional special attention paid to acoustics, daylighting, and envelope commissioning for ensuring energy compliance with the scheme. Some of the things that come to mind, major differences.
Two of the things that I recall talking about last time with you guys was the way the building grounds. It seemed like the prior scheme, the building had a variety of different techniques to meet the ground. So the base of the building in this scheme seems more coherent, more legible, more as though there's a little more restraint on how that's taking place. So that seems to me to be an improvement. And at the southern side of the building, that rear yard, it seems like the relocation of the dog park to that location is a kind of deus ex machina, kind of solves an issue of claiming a space that otherwise hadn't been claimed before and makes it purposeful and allows the dogs to have a significant run back there. So those two things were concerns last time for me, and they seem to be more settled in this scheme than in the prior scheme.
Good morning. This is Rod Hinderer. I missed the June presentation, so I'm just catching up on the project. I have to tell you, I'm actually really like this project. I really like many aspects about it. I like the fact that it has a level of transparency from Battery Street. You can view in, so it's engaged with the street. I like the veranda and the public aspects of it. I like the fact that it's asymmetrical. My hat's off to you guys. I think this is a really interesting project. The only reservation I have, and it's a relatively minor detail, is, the parking garage in the back and the blank walls that you'll end up potentially having, and associated with these green public spaces. There's a little bit of conflict there, but I understand the issue and the problems you have. But just generally, I'm actually very supportive of this project.
Well, I thank you very much for that commentary, and I would say that although not within this presentation, but in the prior submittals, the parking garage as it wraps around the back does have features. So it's just not a blank wall. There's some ventilation areas, as well as a series of panels of potentially like perforated metal, something with a more engaging and, I'll just say, fun expression of architecture on the backside there. So it doesn't feel as dismal as you might think.
Great, thank you.
Jump in with Xiao Joy's comment here. Adding the outdoor furnishings such as tables and chairs and the grill will undoubtedly promote activating the southwest corner green space, but the southwest sun exposure could become an issue. Could you consider adding shade structures to make the seating more comfortable and attractive?
I guess I should respond to to that. It's interesting. We are putting a ton of trees there, and our idea is really to make it feel more park-like. There's so many sort of built elements already around there, that we thought just making it more natural was the way to go. So we have a lot of trees. That was our thinking. That maybe the consideration of putting maybe some sails or something, structures that kind of would provide more of a seasonal shade potentially, but we strongly believe that the trees will provide the shading necessary. I mean, we definitely want the open area because we want to make it usable. So
That's really good. I have, this is Paul Morrison again. I last time I kind of made the comment about the corner tower, and just to respond to what you guys have done since. I think that clearly on the there's been some other detail on the top, which I think helps. But I also think that the cleaning it up a little bit and simplifying it at the base also helps. And it sort of it allows that corner now to be a little bit more iconic to the overall composition. So I think those two moves that you've made have improved it. And so I think that was a good thing. I have kind of a minor, just a minor comment. If you could go to, I think, page 13 and then page 12, the perspective renderings that you have there. 13 first. Yeah. One thing is, I think it might help, it's a minor thing, but I'm not exactly sure why you have grass, right, or in any type of ground cover right in front of sort of the curb to your fronting garden right there, that little strip. I think that, if you did something there and made the sidewalk even wider, at least for the width of your front plaza, I think that would be a good thing. I think you probably want more space there for people to be able to stand and talk and to make it a little bit more of a plaza-like kind of a character. But what I also like about this is this one, is that at the corner here of this plaza, so this is the, what is this? This is the east corner?
West.
The west corner.
west, yeah.
you've engaged the arcade and the plaza right in front of the arcade out to the front sidewalk. So basically allowing the plaza to be this width. Now, if you go to page 12. But on this end, you didn't do that. And again, I think it's maybe not, I think it's maybe a minor comment, but I think it would be better if you connected this end also, and that the gardens with the trees in them were sort of like planters within this central plaza. And then it allows, I think, the entire plaza to be fully engaged with that sidewalk. And it makes, you know, it really turns this all into a plaza rather than something that's behind, you know, the barrier of this front garden. So, you know, perhaps I think if we could get rid of the, just is the width of the plaza, if you could get rid of that front piece of grass, and then possibly bring this corner through as well to engage it to the sidewalk. I think that just those two moves might make this plaza feel more like it's a completely public and open plaza and part of the street. And I think maybe that also helps in many ways to respond to some of the public comments that we heard about, you know, the width and trying to create a wider place, you know, for people as they're walking along the street. I don't think that's I'm not sure why you didn't connect it at this end, but, you know, perhaps that could be considered and might help.
Paul, this is Trini. I believe we actually have that. So it's possible that this is not totally accurate. I know we looked at different options, and the idea of this front porch is to really be connected to the streetscape as kind of like an extension of it. And as Eric had expressed, you know, in his presentation, it's really the idea of kind of being a neighbor, you know, of this is a place where you meet your neighbors, you know, and having a place, you know, that the community interacts. So totally, I do think that's there, you know, possibly a miscommunication, but whatever it is, we agree with that. We actually think we have it, but we'll check.
Right.
Steve, is there anything you want to add? This is Steve Sattler from our office, which I know has been
I was
intimately.
just gonna say, yeah, we've been kind of back and forth on that that extra connection there, but I hear you. I think that probably does make some sense to kind of create that extra connection.
I just want to underscore what Paul said, and one of the ideas is that there's been some neighborhood concern about the building encroaching northward onto the street, and if that plaza is more legible with the trees floating in an island of green, and you pick up the edge of the plaza from the edge of the porch structure and bring it out to the sidewalk, I think there'll be a perception of a more generous space rather than a kind of boundary between yourself, particularly at the east end and that space. So I want to encourage you guys to try to wrestle with that, because I think that'll actually help you guys in that other realm.
Absolutely, Brian. Yeah, no, we agree. I think we've always been describing this as a very porous sort of connection to a porch and a streetscape, and really engaging both. Totally.
I do actually have one question. What is the brown material, the vertical brown material?
Steve, you want to answer? So that's a focal point element.
Yeah, the intent is it's kind of a seating platform, so it's kind of a flexible space that has some planting incorporated with it.
On the facade of the building. What is
on the facade?
Yeah, vertical brown material.
We're still evaluating materiality to some extent based on the different building systems that are available. Here, it's you could almost think it's terracotta or a masonry element or colored metal panel, but it's not yet absolutely determined exactly what it is. What we're striving for is, a somewhat restrained palette of color and textures, not overdone, but enough to be interesting and to be engaging at sort of like a human scale in terms of the textures of the choices we make. I mean, obviously things are accented by the metal panel, which is going to be smooth, but there's going to be a juxtaposition between that type of.
Yeah, here's the reason for asking. So, you know, you could say, well, it could be terracotta, it could be wood. If you look at the residential project, I think it's on Arlington across from Stroh-Snyder. They put wood siding on their building as an accent material. In time, it's grayed out, and if it were wood, it would probably gray out to look like all your brick masonry, and you would lose that as an accent material. So that's the reason for asking.
Understood. It's interesting when we do have a wood expression. We very rarely use real wood. The product called Perderma that simulates. Yeah,
I'm familiar with
a lot of that.
But they on that residential project on Arlington, they actually did use real wood, and it's, you know, it was great for a year or two, but now it's just kind of melted into the rest of the building.
Sure. I mean, if that was the intent that they were hoping for, you know, great. But if not, then not so great. I guess the bottom line is that as we evaluate our material choices, our hope is that there's a timelessness to it, so that what we put forth construction finishes is what will remain for the lifetime of the building as much as possible in terms of that coloration and expression.
With the discussion winding down, it sounds like the panel may be today. As a reminder, the applicant is requesting 20 points. 20 points is indicative of a superlative design that is uniquely compelling, that in a uniquely compelling way meets the design guidelines or overcomes a significant site or similar constraint, a top example of design within lookup. What are the thoughts here?
I agree with 20.
Yeah, I think this is a very thoughtfully designed building. I'm comfortable with 20 points.
I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah, you get thumbs up.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any additional comments or conditions for the applicant to follow through with during the site plan application phase? Thank you. We get to end a little bit early. We do have a second item today in 7340 Wisconsin, so we will see you.
Thank you, everyone.
On that one.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Appreciate your
Thank you
comments,
again.
Barry.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.